But the whole point of having everybody out here today is to get to go around the farm and talk about things that you want to talk about, things you don't always get to see. So I wanted to give a brief introduction about where you're standing and kind of how we got here, but then mostly talk about things you want to talk about. So I encourage people really to interrupt me with questions if you have one, probably other people do too, and really get into the nitty gritty of what it is you're seeing that's going on out here. Because there's a big disconnect between people who eat and those of us who grow the food. So it affects all of you. And one of the missions of my farm really was to show the reality of the day-to-day of farming. So not necessarily paint the fairy tale pictures that people like to hear in the marketing world, but kind of show you the challenges that we deal with on a day-to-day basis, and then a lot of the cooler things that happen out here too. So quick background. I started the farm in 2010. I grew up in the Bay Area and worked at a restaurant down in Berkeley when I was going to college. Good luck and fortune, we ended up with this property here. And we met the landlords through an organization called California Farmland that hooks up farmers with landowners. And they had been looking for somebody to farm the land organically. It had been conventionally farmed here. You're standing on 50 acres, and there's 30 acres of an L-shaped field that you drove down along the driveways you came in. So they worked with us, and really it's been a partnership in a lot of ways to transition to the ground to organic, which takes 3 years of growing a crop with organic standards, and we call that time the transitional period. And then as of June 12th of this year, everything that we do out here is officially certified organic. So in the shell of a barn, which was a 100-year-old barn, they actually shored up this wall and put in solar panels when they initially bought this property 25 years ago. Along the way, they put this together. We came in and poured some new floors and built these coolers over here. These are the walk-in coolers to your side there. Put it in a washing path area out here. And we did this all kind of again at the lucky timing where the big push in the farm world these days is all around food safety. So everything that we did here was in mind with kind of keeping standing water away, having a flow where on my farm in particular we don't cross animal and vegetable paths. So everything here is set up to facilitate that. I'll talk a little bit more about that. But to back up to the beginnings of my farm, the goals that I had when we started the farm were really singularly focused to start, and that was what I call integrated farming, where we wanted to grow animals and vegetables on the same ground, use animals as a resource of fertilizer, and some other things that we'll talk about as we walk after the chickens to support the vegetable operation, and then the access from the vegetable operation to support really high quality eggs. So it's an old school style in which we call truck farming, right? Which is where maybe 50 years ago, farmers who grew diversity crops would literally throw them back to the truck and take it to town. What we now see is farming like this here is massage the financial side of the business so that we can support as many of those ecological practices and human sustainability practices that we would like to see in a way that we can actually still function as a business. What I'd like to do is, like I said, the hottest part of the day here. For those that are not from YOLO County, this isn't even that hot of a day, but we are in the hottest part of the day. We had a couple of weeks ago where we had straight 106 for 6 days. It's probably about 92 right now. So imagine being in the middle of a 10-hour day with it about 15 degrees hotter, doing physical work on the side of a row, cherry tomatoes with no wind. So it's pretty hard work, but it is also very rewarding. So I think where we're going to start is we're going to take a quick lap through the field, and I'm going to point out some of the practices that we do when we talk about growing vegetables, again, as a small business, and then circle back to the chickens so that we're not trampling through the chickens and then running our feet out to the vegetable field. We'll work our way back, and then we'll end up here, and of course pausing and stopping for anything else that anybody else wants to talk about along the way. So before I go, any other things that I've touched on? A lot of expense that goes into growing food, and unlike most other small businesses, the margins are razor thin. You're talking about like a couple of percent versus a retail business that could have a 40–50% markup on product. We spend 6 months to produce a product that we then have a couple of days to move against a lot of risk for very, very little margin. So it's a pretty insane way to try to make a living, really. But again, we have a lot of good models out there of folks that have done it, and to go back to the good fortune, kind of how I landed here. The Capay Valley in particular, of which we are at the mouth, it has about 50 small working successful farms that do, in a lot of cases, there's a handful who do similar things to what we do in producing diversified vegetables for CSA and restaurants and farmers markets. And it's a pretty special group of people, I have to say. Having worked in Watsonville, sort of the necessity and the difficulty of the business breeds this sort of Machiavellian, sort of insular, duplicitous mindset where people can get pretty nasty cutthroat. But here in the Capay Valley, it couldn't be more the opposite. We've had so many farms help us out with equipment and help us out with knowledge, and you know, just from every standpoint, it's just a really amazing place to work and live in this type of business, and that people are so supportive. And that was just, again, another stroke of luck that we ended up here. Did I answer kind of what you're going for a little bit? Cool. Somebody else? Yeah.
How many eggplants have you personally eaten in the last month?
So Sam's a very loyal CSA member here, and they've been eating a lot of eggplant this summer. So I've eaten a lot. I go home with probably a bag full of eggplant, but luckily that's one of my wife's favorite vegetables, and that might have something to do with the fact that there's so much eggplant in boxes.
You gotta talk to my wife.
Yeah. We'll work on some more eggplant recipes. Anybody else? Cool. Well, let's go talk about vegetables real quick. Like I said, I'll try to keep it brief and point out a few things. Stop me if you want to dive further into anything else, and then circle back to everybody's favorite part, which is the chickens. Brassicas they can find, but typically in YOLO County we don't have a lot of brassicas, so they go for their second favorite, which is the solanum. So anything like those peppers, that family. They found this pepper field, and then they found the daikon, and they were in heaven, and they start breeding really quickly, and they can pump out a couple hundred young in a couple of weeks. So what we did was we found huge populations in here, and they were especially on this daikon, but hadn't really moved over to kind of that blue-green sea that you see over there, which is our first set of brassicas. So as soon as we cleared out this pepper field, we brought the chickens in, and we're hoping that they're going to town right now on the bagrada bug to try to keep these early fall populations down. And really what we're hoping for is just trying to get to the point where the daily temperature gets below 80 degrees and they slow down significantly. But this is an example of how, you know, the chickens serve sort of a whole ecosystem purpose on our farm, not just producing eggs.
Have you found that the protein from the bugs have increased their eggs?
Increased eggs, no. So chicken feed is a great topic. We can talk about this all day. So one of the first things we get a lot with chickens is hey, hang on a second, you're feeding your chickens. I thought they were pastured birds. Why are you giving them feed? And you know, chickens get some nutrition from greens, but chickens are not ruminants. So the majority of their food, you know, does not come from the greenery and what they're eating. And it increases the quality through the diversity of feed that they eat. But what chickens really need is protein. And without getting into human nutrition, what they really need is access to complete sources of protein, like bugs and animals. And anything living has what we would call a complete protein, meaning it has all the amino acids that you would need to build all of the different proteins that you need for muscle and fiber and eggs. Right, so we've bred chickens to be these sort of Olympic avian athletes and put out eggs at a really high rate to where it's even economically feasible for us, right? 80 years ago, a dozen eggs cost you the equivalent of about 6 hours wage. And now, you know, we charge $8 to $10 a dozen for eggs, and it seems really high to most folks. But really, by the time we do it in a way that we feel like is humane and high quality, there's really not a lot of money left in there for us to take home and invest back into the farm. So that really comes down to components of their base feed, plus a bunch of herbs that we use. We're really big on creating masses for them, which is simply a wet feed. Approximates the consistency of something that a chicken would like to eat, like a bug, a lot closer. You know, we can't actually feed them by organic standards. We're not allowed to feed them, say, like fish parts or any animal product, but again, having them in the field and going to town on these bagrada bugs, they get access to that. So to produce the highest quality egg possible, really what we're looking for is diversity of feed. And there was a really nice thing that came out of this is in sort of developing this, we didn't just switch all of our flocks over to a soy-free feed when our customers asked us to. We have, this is our biggest house, we call it the Behemoth, and then we have 3 other smaller houses that we use for a total. This is 800 chickens. And then each of our other houses has about 250. And those are over at our original ranch still. We're waiting for them to make the big move over here. But we took one of those houses and separated it out and fed our normal soy-based organic feed. And and then did a soy-free feed for 2 years fully. We did an experiment. At the end of the experiment, we noticed something really interesting. We're looking great and putting out really high-quality eggs at the end of the 2 years. And we noticed that difference starting right around 9 months. As we look back at production records and even just observing them. Their feathers were healthier, the birds' combs were healthier, and the eggs were higher quality after about a couple of years. So we were able to extend their life about another 6 months past using the soy-free feed. So, you know, I found that there's something in eating soy every single day of your life after about 9 months to really affect the absorption of nutrients. So, not that there's anything wrong with soy in particular, but in that scenario, every single day is one of your mainstays that seems to have furrow to the center of this furrow is 60 inches. And then we plant everything on a scheme, and everything is spaced very precisely so that when we come through, we can do any work in what I call like the longitudinal axis, going this way and cutting out weeds in between the plants using tractors and tools and equipment. So the term for that is cultivation and mechanical cultivation. But it's really hard on a small farm growing a bunch of different crops to do that in any precise way. So we built a couple of tools that really help us do that. And this is a technique that we use called stale bedding, which is sort of pre-planting and is really critical. So we list the beds, meaning that we mark everything out so we know where our 60-inch centers are. When we come in, we pre-irrigate. So we sprouted all of the weed seeds that are in the viable portion of the soil. So the top couple inches has what we call, the soil contains what we call our seed bank, right? Which is, this is all the stuff that has previously gone to seed and it's just sitting in the soil waiting for conditions to be right, where it feels like it has access to light, it can sense, has water in the correct temperature zone for it to germinate. So what we try and do is germinate all that stuff in the viable zone and then come through it and mechanically cultivate or kill it such that we kill that stuff but not bring up another flush of viable weeds out of our seed bank. That technique is called stale bedding. And it's a really, really key component to being able to farm organically because it will knock out about 80% of our weeds before we then go in and plant into that stale bed. But it takes a certain set of tools, it takes enough water to overhead irrigate, and a lot of things that we didn't have for a couple of years. So imagine trying to plant into this and then coming back and trying to hand hoe all this stuff out in between. It's a lot of work. But we can see another technique that we have there for us to get everything on the ground in time.
What's the powder?
No, that's a good question. What's the powder? So this is diatomaceous earth. Which is a food-grade product. There's a couple kinds of diatomaceous earth. The one we're talking about is a food-grade product that's actually mixed in commercially with most of your grains. So most of the flours that you eat have up to 2% diatomaceous earth in them. And what diatomaceous earth is ground fossil shells, essentially. It produces these little structures called diatoms, which are essentially like tiny little razor blades if you're an insect. So what they do is we actually get this crop up to about this size, so we've got a canopy, and we'll spread a couple 100 pounds of diatomaceous to the acre and try to slow down that pagoda bug. Because what they do is, one of the reasons they're so hard to control is even if we use nasty pesticides, they're pretty hard pest to control. If we don't, so they're even harder. But what they do is you come over mechanically, they drop down into this space right underneath the plant and bury themselves into the soil. So what we have to do is dust the field with this. This is a technique that we developed, and again, this is in the last couple of years in Northern California. We're still just trying to figure this out. Nobody really has a good control. We were the first farm to find it in YOLO County, and we experimented with a couple of things last year, 2 of which seemed to work okay. We didn't lose our crop. I mean, this crop looks pretty good. Is diatomaceous earth at a couple 100 pounds to the acre, and we try not to disturb the field. We try not to walk on the furrows, because what happens is they scurry along the ground. If they try to claw up the plant, they get covered in diatomaceous earth, and it starts to piss them off and dry them out, and they got to spend so much time cleaning themselves that they don't feed very well. And it'll really slow down their breeding. So it's, you know, a pretty benign product, again, that's food grade. Something we use in our chicken house as well to help keep lice and mites and stuff at bay. But it actually works pretty effectively. It's essentially what is a pesticide, trying to slow down the growth of this particularly nasty stink bug. The other thing that we found that worked pretty well last year, that for a couple of reasons we're not doing this year, is actually watering the hottest part of the day for a couple minutes at a time and washing them off the plant. And then we let it dry out, and then about every hour we would kick it on for a couple of minutes. Just as they came up the plant and start to do their feeding damage, we'd knock them off. Do that over and over and over again to the point where you piss them off. They don't eat very well and they slow down. So that's kind of your best bet. And the reason I don't think I mentioned pagoda bug is so particularly bad is that they eat not just sort of this stuff around the leaf, these holes, and sometimes those caterpillars that you find in your broccoli or cauliflower. Those are a family called Lepidoptera, which are annoying, but not a big deal. The problem with Magrata is they go to this terminus, or the growth point of the plant in the center here, which for all of your brassicas, they're heading crops, right? You want a head of cabbage, or a head of cauliflower, or a head of broccoli or Romanesco, and the Magrata bug goes to that point and kills that terminus. So then the plant tries to branch out and throw out another head, and they kill that, and then another head and they kill that. So you end up with an 8-headed, small, deformed cabbage that nobody wants to eat or buy. It also stresses out the plant, weakens to the point where typically they become susceptible to other bugs. So the aphids